Our story begins with a 2002 article in New York Magazine titled Jeffrey Epstein, International Money Man of Mystery. The article was about an unknown financier who had gained a tremendous amount of wealth, knew an incredible number of powerful people, and no one was quite sure how. A few words given to the article by one of Jeffrey's close friends would provide one of the most famous quotes of all time.
I came down here in 2007, and back then, there was very little known about Jeffrey Epstein. What people knew about him was that he was stunningly rich. The guy was living a life that most people dream about. He had a $15 to $20 million house here in Palm Beach. He had one of the largest townhouses in New York City, a massive apartment in Paris, his own private island in the Caribbean, a sprawling ranch in New Mexico, a helicopter, 2 airplanes, one a 727.
Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. They were both wealthy guys from New York, and they both ended up living a mile apart along Billionaires Row in Palm Beach. They knew each other. Epstein frequented Mar-a-Lago for a time.
Palm Beach is a very small town. It's almost impossible to conceive of living there and moving in that world and not hearing rumors about Epstein or not being aware of something odd going on at Jeff's place.
Bradley Edwards was a lawyer who represented many of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. In 2011, Edwards issued a subpoena to Donald Trump. Edwards wasn't looking to convict Trump. He knew they were friends and wanted only to gain any additional information that he could for his case against Jeffrey Epstein. Edwards had to justify the subpoena for the courts in a document called an undisputed statement of facts. In this document, Edwards listed the connections that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein had at the time. They included the following. 1. During the raid, message pads confiscated from Epstein's home indicated that Donald Trump called Epstein's West Palm Beach mansion on several occasions. 2. Donald Trump was quoted in a 2002 New York Magazine article about Epstein as saying, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life." 3. Mark Epstein, who was Jeffrey Epstein's brother, testified that Trump had flown on Epstein's plane with him. 4. It was known that Trump had been to Epstein's home in Palm Beach. 5. Authorities found that Epstein's phone directory contained 14 phone numbers for Donald Trump, including emergency numbers, car numbers, and numbers to Trump's security guard and houseman. Yes, you heard that right. 14. 6. In his deposition, Epstein took the fifth rather than answer the question, "Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18? Keep in mind that the deposition was given before Donald Trump was in politics. The prosecutor asked based only on knowledge of their relationship, and he wouldn't have asked if he didn't already know the answer. We learned about several of Donald Trump's connections to Jeffrey Epstein through attorney Brad Edwards' undisputed statement of facts. There are a few other connections to keep in mind that will help to create an understanding of the depth of their friendship. Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein socialized together fairly often. We know this because there are several photographs of them together. There are also numerous photos of Donald Trump with Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine had been a friend for years and would sometimes set him up with dates. There's also the famous party that was filmed in Mar-a-Lago where Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein are seen hanging out. But there are also many lesser-known connections between the two. In this chapter, we'll take a look at some of those connections.
Come on in. Go inside.
An invitation into Donald Trump's world. Footage from 1992 found in the NBC archives shows the future president welcoming Jeffrey Epstein to his Mar-a-Lago estate. The get-together more than a decade before Epstein pleaded guilty to prostitution charges in Florida. Both men are seen enjoying themselves, Trump pointing out women dancing in front of them. An apparently friendly encounter with a man the president is now looking to distance himself from.
Speaking of Trump, he just took to social media to say that he was, quote, never on Epstein's plane or at his stupid island. Sounds like something a 4-year-old would say. I've never been on a stupid island, a stupid plane, stupid house. You're stupid.
I was never on Epstein's plane or at his stupid island. Strong laws ought to be developed against AI. It will be a big and very dangerous problem in the future, end quote. Here is the problem I have with this, not the AI part, that was awful. I have a problem with what he said because only part of his denial may be true. There is no record of Donald Trump ever visiting Jeffrey Epstein's Caribbean island, Little St. James. That is clear. But there is plenty of hard evidence that he rode on Epstein's plane, and not just one time, 7 times, at least 7 times. And we know that because his name appears in flight logs that are submitted to the FAA. Here's what they reveal. Trump flew 4 times in 1993. He flew once in 1994 and again in 1995. Those are in addition to a flight that was previously reported and documented in 1997. All of the flights were between Palm Beach and New York City. And the logs show Epstein was on board the plane with Trump as well, each of those times. The 1994 flight is notable because Trump's then-wife Marla Maples is also listed on the flight log. And according to those logs, they decided to bring along their then-infant daughter, Tiffany Trump, as well as the family's nanny. They are all on the log. On the flight in 1995, the logs say that Trump also brought along his then 12-year-old son, Eric Trump. So, again, these are documents that are submitted to the FAA. These are not just claims made by someone in a deposition. So it is hard to sort of reconcile when the president says, I was never on that airplane.
Over the weekend, Trump's Boeing 757 had mechanical issues that forced it to make an unscheduled stop on Friday. What? A Boeing had a mechanical issue? You could knock me over with a feather, which is also how you can pop out one of their doors. The Trump team scrambled to replace the broken plane with a rented Gulfstream G550. Nothing wrong with that, except something wrong with that, because it turns out it's Jeffrey Epstein's plane. Wow, Trump and Epstein, if that plane could talk, it would be found dead in its jail cell. Now, finding out... Keep it light. Now, finding out that they'd rented the plane of one of Trump's notorious pedophile buddies has thrown the Trump team into a full panic mode, which is why they released a statement claiming that the campaign had absolutely no idea the aircraft they rented was previously owned by Mr. Epstein. So now they're ditching Epstein's plane, and instead Trump will be traveling to all future events in O.J. Simpson's hot air balloon.
In November of 1997, we got something I gotta say very sus. Now, Trump began dating 20-year-old English model Anushka DeGiorgio. But what makes this relationship suspicious is that Anushka DeGiorgio was one of Jeffrey Epstein's sex slaves, again, his words, and she was reportedly introduced to Trump by Ghislaine Maxwell. Check out this article from British tabloid The Sunday Press. Several American millionaires already had their eye on Anushka, but she was there with Robert Maxwell's daughter Ghislaine, who has introduced several of her attractive friends to the property developer, Trump. After their meeting, Trump flew Madam Maxwell and the model south to the Sunshine State, where all three enjoyed a happy weekend together. When they returned to New York, Anushka was installed in one of Donald's many apartments there. Anushka would later become the first British woman to publicly allege her abuse at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein. In her words, "When I was introduced to Jeffrey Epstein, I was young, full of hope and foolishness of a teenager. Jeffrey Epstein manipulated me, coerced me, and abused me. He cannot begin to fathom what he did to us.
The phrase Epstein didn't kill himself became a viral meme in the months after his death. And the conspiracy theory keeps popping up both in real life and online, including, amazingly, on the Twitter feed of a member of Congress. And it's gotten a boost from some legitimately disturbing facts about what actually did happen to him inside that prison. Epstein was taken off suicide watch in the days before his death, despite a previous suicide attempt. There are reports that video footage from outside his jail cell is missing or unusable. What I find particularly strange and remarkable about this conspiracy theory that he was murdered is that it has become a right-wing conspiracy theory, despite the conditions of Epstein's death. Remember, he was in a federal prison when he died, a prison that's run by the Justice Department, which is overseen by Attorney General William Barr, who answers to Donald Trump. That's who had custody of Epstein when he was taken off suicide watch, who was in charge when the guards didn't check on him and when the camera footage went missing. It was all on William Barr's watch. Also, Trump was friends with Epstein for years. The two men repeatedly partying together in the presence of young women. So if you've got questions about Jeffrey Epstein's death, those questions should really go to William Barr, who worked for Donald Trump. And then, amid all of this, who does Donald Trump pick as his defense lawyers in his impeachment trial? Alan Dershowitz and Kenneth Starr. These two famous attorneys represented Epstein more than a decade ago and helped him get a sweetheart deal.
And now, a message from the President of the United States.
My fellow Americans, I would like to address reports alleging that I was friends with billionaire convicted sexual predator Jeffrey Epstein and attended his infamous parties. Sure, I told New York Magazine in 2002 that Epstein is a terrific guy. But that was before I found out that I said later in the same sentence that he likes beautiful women on the younger side. I knew I had to cut off our relationship right then and several years after there. And why would I go to Epstein's home? I don't want to be reminded of the things I've seen there.
According to a report from the New York Times, in 1992, Donald Trump held a party that featured just himself and Jeffrey Epstein as the host, and the attendees were only 28 young girls. That, of course, is according to a man by the name of George Harane, who ran American Dream Enterprise, and he claimed in an interview that he organized the event after a request from Donald Trump. And again, this event was in 1992, before any of the criminal charges against Epstein. That doesn't excuse it. But Mr. Harane said, I arranged to have some contestants fly in. He had recently partnered with Donald Trump, for events and business deals. At the very first party, I said, who's coming tonight? I have 28 girls coming. It was him and Epstein. I said, look, Donald, I know Jeff really well. I can't have him going after younger girls, he said. Look, I'm putting my name on this. He wouldn't put my name on it and have a scandal, or I wouldn't put my name on it and have a scandal, Trump replied. So, even back then, Epstein's activities, we'll call them, were pretty well known. And this guy, Harane, who did know Epstein in, 15 years, is like, listen, putting him and you together in a room with 28 young girls is not a good idea, but they went forward with it anyway. Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, and a room of 28 young women.
But, Donald Trump was asked about Jeffrey Epstein, and when he was asked, he said, Jeffrey likes him young. Well, how did the president know that? How did he know that Jeffrey Epstein likes him young? Perhaps some people are saying he was there.
In March of 2000, Maximum Golf magazine published an article about Trump by Michael Corcoran, mentioning that he flew on Trump's private jet with Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell. In 2019, the same reporter would say in an interview with the Daily Mail that he vividly remembered Maxwell, Epstein, and a young girl turning up late to board Trump's plane. Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the girl in question were late for the appointed takeoff time, which is why I remember it so well. Trump was extremely angry about that. He was screaming, "Never be late for someone else's plane. That's the number one rule." But he liked him enough to wait. What I do remember thinking about the girl, though, is that she was pretty, attractive. She was of an indeterminate age, though I realized she was young. I thought she could be anywhere from 15 to 20. She wore noticeable makeup and had obviously spent time prepping to look nice for the flight.
Acosta tweeted this morning saying the crimes committed by Epstein are horrific, and I am pleased prosecutors are moving forward with a case based on new evidence. Now, the tweet comes after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called for Acosta's resignation, saying Secretary Acosta engaged in unconscionable agreement, and Pelosi claims this agreement was known by the president when he appointed Acosta to his cabinet. Take a listen to how President Trump responded to that today.
I feel very badly, actually, for Secretary Acosta.
Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison, and so a lot of people want to know if she's going to turn in powerful people. And I know you've talked in the past about Prince Andrew, and you've criticized Bill Clinton's behavior. I'm wondering, do you feel that she's going to turn in powerful men? How do you see that working out?
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well, frankly.
Mr. President, the other day a reporter asked you about Ghislaine Maxwell. You said, quote, I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, but I wish her well, whatever it is. Mr. President, Ghislaine Maxwell has been arrested on allegations of child sex trafficking. Why would you wish such a person well?
First of all, I don't know that, but I do know that
she has. She's been arrested for that. You know that.
Friend or boyfriend,
Epstein,
was either killed or committed suicide in jail. She's now in jail. Yeah, I wish her well. I'd wish you well. I'd wish a lot of people well. Good luck. Let them prove somebody was guilty. I mean, do you know that
so you're saying you hope she doesn't die in jail? Is that what you mean by wish her well?
Her boyfriend died in jail, and people are still trying to figure out, how did it happen? Was it suicide? Was he killed? And I do wish her well. I'm not looking for anything bad for her. I'm not looking bad for anybody. And they took that and
she's a child sex, alleged child sex trafficker.
Big deal. But all it is her boyfriend died. He died in jail. Was he killed? Was it suicide? I do. I wish her well.
So President Trump sat for a big sit-down interview with Axios' Jonathan Swan, made all kinds of news, had an interesting exchange on coronavirus and testing and deaths and all of those things. But he also had another very eyebrow-raising exchange regarding his thoughts and feelings on Ghislaine Maxwell. This comes, of course, on the heels of previous comments that Trump had made about wishing her well, which caught everyone by surprise. I mean, first of all, he's trying to play this part like he doesn't really know what the allegations are. How can you not know? Everybody in the country knows what the allegations are, right? Jonathan Swan has to explain to him that she is being tried for sex trafficking, that is what she is accused of. And the other bizarre thing here, Rachel, is that we learned last week from one of the alleged survivors here that she had said that Bill Clinton had been on Jeffrey Epstein's island as well. That seems like the sort of thing that Trump would be all over, like delighted to talk about and go in on the conspiracy theories and the whole thing. And instead, he has this bizarre line that he's sticking to about how he wishes her well. Like, what is going on here?
It is super odd. I don't have an explanation for it other than like he's either not watching it closely or he is and has like thoughts he's not saying. It's the whole thing is very unclear.
You had an extraordinary dinner, I think, in London, didn't you, where Donald Trump was there and Epstein and Prince Andrew and Bill Clinton. I mean,
as well.
So the small dinner party, and you're sitting there with all these extraordinary people.
You know, I was very young and very impressionable, and, you know, Jeffrey was a very charismatic man. You know, he would walk into a room and people would take notice. With him and Ghislaine, it was kind of like teamwork. He had the finance, she had the black book, and they were a great pair together, and kind of together they were sort of taking over the world.
But that dinner party,
they were sort of,
so how many people were there?
Not many. I would say probably about 14 people,
14
maybe.
people, and that includes President Bill Clinton, President now Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, and Prince Andrew. I mean, that's an extraordinary dinner party.
Moving right along to January of 1993, and we've got another photo of Trump, Eric, and Ivanka photographed with Epstein at the grand opening of the Manhattan Harley-Davidson Cafe. In December 1993, at Trump and Marla Maples' wedding at the Plaza Hotel in New York, David Jones snapped this photo of a man who looks a lot like Epstein. Is it him? I can't be 100% sure, but I will say it would be a very on-brand move for Epstein to wear jeans to a wedding. Now, here's a nice photo from January 1995 of Epstein and Maxwell at a Mar-a-Lago party. So in April of that year, Trump and Epstein were photographed at a Victoria's Secret Angels party. Moving on to the year 2000. In February, we've got a photo of Trump, Epstein, Melania, and Maxwell hanging out at another Mar-a-Lago party. Maxwell showed up to the party looking like a denim cigar lounge lampshade. Royal nonce Prince Andrew was also in attendance that night, who Trump will later claim not to know.
Is Donald Trump the infamous Doe number 174? Is Donald Trump Doe 174? I want to start with this great piece by Business Insider. This just broke, this news. It sure looks like Donald Trump was disguised as Doe 174 in the newly unsealed Jeffrey Epstein documents, it says. A federal judge unsealed the names of nearly 200 Does, and it appears that Donald Trump may be Doe 174. And it may also be the case that Donald Trump's lawyers were trying to secretly fight behind the scenes from having his name released, according to this investigative report.
None of Jeffrey Epstein's many clients have ever been charged with a sex crime. The only two people connected to the child sex trafficking ring to be criminally charged were the two people running it, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It is well known that Donald Trump was friends with both of them. There have only been 3 civil lawsuits filed by victims to Epstein clients. All 3 of the defendants were friends of Donald Trump. Virginia Giuffre sued Prince Andrew and settled out of court. Donald Trump has stated several times that he doesn't know Prince Andrew. There are multiple photos of them together, including a party at Mar-a-Lago. Virginia also sued Trump's friend and impeachment lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, describing in great detail on her sworn deposition about their multiple sexual encounters. 6 in all. She eventually dropped that lawsuit after Dershowitz filed a counterclaim. And finally, multi-billionaire Leon Black is currently being sued by an autistic victim of Epstein. The plaintiff, who is now in her late 30s, was born with mosaic Down syndrome and has a developmental age of around 12. Her description of Black's cruelty towards her is spine-chilling. Her lawsuit describes how Leon Black used sex toys on her so violently that it left her bleeding and begging Epstein and Maxwell to help her, which they refused to do. Ghislaine Maxwell threw her a towel. The woman's name is being withheld and is currently in the courts. Leon Black and Donald Trump were business associates who once traveled to Russia together in an effort to seek out new partnerships. Black is also friends with Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner.
Michael Wolff, who wrote Fire and Fury, released a bunch of audio recordings that he had with the late Jeffrey Epstein, specifically talking about his relationship with Donald Trump. Notably, in one, he talks about how close friends he was with Donald Trump for 10 years, and he also seems to have some inside information about the Trump White House after Trump wins in 2016, which would also indicate, he had not been excised from Trump's circle to the extent that Trump had previously claimed. Let's take a listen to that.
So how do you know this?
That was close to straight.
I have more than dozens. I probably have 100 hours of Epstein talking about the inner workings of the Trump White House and about his long-standing, deep relationship with Donald Trump.
We can put the tear sheet up on the screen here. This is from the Daily Beast that reported on the contents of this audio. They say they did an audio analysis and matched Epstein's voice to, previous depositions that he had given. In addition to the comments we played, he also claimed lots of intimate knowledge of Trump's sexual preferences, including liking to cuck other married men, claimed that he had sex with Melania for the first time on the Lolita Express. Make of it whatever you will. I'll just say that, if this was about any Democrat, if it was about Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, whoever, you would endlessly hear about it from Republicans. And, Jeffrey Epstein, the king of global elite pedophilia, having a close relationship with Donald Trump, which again, some of this is already in the public, and they just completely ignore it, it says a lot about their consistency and their principle when it comes to this and literally anything else.
We know with a great degree of certainty that Jeffrey Epstein had recorded guests abusing his young victims. Epstein likely used these videos as leverage for a blackmail operation. Here are the main pieces of evidence that point to this conclusion. 1. When authorities first raided Epstein's estate, it was noted that surveillance equipment had been set up, but all the servers had been removed. There were also no tapes. This leads to the belief that Epstein had been tipped off about the raid.
7 months into the case, detectives executed the search warrant at Mr. Epstein's residence.
They opened the doors and went up the winding staircase into his ornate and bizarre world. Pictures of young kids, half naked, nudes everywhere. One of the police officers who saw it said that it was just really weird. Detectives also discovered a very bizarre steam room and massage room set up. They actually found some computers and equipment remain in the house, but police suspected most of Epstein's computer hard drives, surveillance cameras, and videos had already been taken out of the house.
There was space on a desk where wires were hanging, but there was no computer. At that point, it was fairly clear to us that Mr. Epstein knew that he was under investigation. Epstein had been tipped off.
2. Ghislaine Maxwell told a 60 Minutes producer before the 2016 election that there were tapes, but she would never release them to benefit one side.
Very interesting new notes. Former 60 Minutes producer Ira Rosen, he's written a new book with some new tell-all. So this is what we got over from the Daily Mail. Let's put this up there on the screen. So according to Ira Rosen, again, this is according to Ira Rosen, who is a former 60 Minutes producer, he was told by Ghislaine Maxwell that Jeffrey Epstein did have tapes of Donald Trump and the Clintons, but she was tricked after she was tricked, but that she refused to help locate them because she wanted Hillary to win.
It is interesting to me, though, how these things get zero attention, zero coverage whatsoever.
Yeah,
no one really
buried.
talks about it at all. Yeah, it just disappears into the ether, even as you have, relatively credible people who were in a position to at least speak to Ghislaine Maxwell, putting out this information in a new book.
3. In an interview, Jeffrey Epstein's brother Mark revealed that Jeffrey told him before the 2016 election that if he released what he had on Trump and Clinton, they would have to cancel the election.
Do you believe, obviously Jeffrey, your brother, had relationships, friendships with many, many of the most rich, famous, powerful people in the world. Do you believe that, let's take this theory to a conclusion here. Do you think that one of those people who may have had a vested interest in shutting him up and not talking about what he knew about them potentially may have played a part in his death?
Yes, that's what I think happened. And then you have to question, out of the rich and powerful people he knew, who would have the ability to pull something like this off? That's another question. Who would have the ability to plant somebody in there, if that's the way it was done? Who would have the ability to have the Justice Department come up with this, pardon the language, this bullshit report? In the Justice Department report, it just says that it was declared dead by the pathologist. But that's not true. It was declared undetermined by the pathologist that did the actual report.
With us now, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark. Nice to talk to you, sir. We appreciate the time. There are so many unanswered questions here. If you and your suspicions are correct that something else other than suicide happened to your brother, there was a reason for it. And I'm wondering, we know so much or so little, whatever you want to say, about his death. What's being covered up about his life, and who would want him dead and why?
Well, he had dirt on people. He told me, it's been out there that in 2016, he said he had dirt on the then presidential candidates.
4. Epstein victim Sarah Ransoam stated that she had heard about the tapes from other victims. She initially stated that she had actually seen the tapes, but then retracted that statement, noting that she had just heard about them.
She alleges surveillance cameras were hidden throughout his various properties.
There are videos that exist. The people that know they exist I'm sure are very frightened of them being released.
So how do you know then that Epstein had cameras on the island?
It's no secret that everything was recorded. Multiple victims have come forward confirming my account, along with others.
5. James B. Stewart is a reporter with the New York Times. This is an excerpt from his August 2018 interview with Jeffrey Epstein. On August 16, 2018, I visited Jeffrey Epstein at his cavernous Manhattan mansion. The overriding impression I took away from our roughly 90-minute conversation was that Mr. Epstein knew an astonishing number of rich, famous, and powerful people and had photos to prove it. He also claimed to know a great deal about these people, some of it potentially damaging or embarrassing, including details about their supposed sexual proclivities and recreational drug use. And lastly, Maria Farmer was a resident artist and part-time property manager for Jeffrey Epstein. She talks in this interview about being given a tour by Epstein of the upstairs area of the mansion. This is the area where all of his surveillance equipment was set up, peeking in on every room in the house, including the bathrooms.
One day I said to Jeffrey, "What goes on in this house? Like, why are you always upstairs?" And he said, "I'll show you." And so he took me up there in the elevator, and he showed me all of Ghislaine's quarters.
She had her own suite in the house.
Oh, she had a whole floor.
Ultimately, Farmer says, Epstein led her to his bathroom.
And there was a marble, altar thing over here, and he said that's where he gets his massages.
Epstein told her the whole house was wired with pinhole cameras and took her into the media room where they were monitored.
I looked on the cameras, and I saw toilet, toilet, bed, bed, toilet, bed. I'm like, I am never going to use the restroom here, and I'm never going to sleep here.
Was there videotape?
Oh, yeah, it was all video, all the time, yeah. And I asked him one time, "What do you do with this?" And he said, "I keep it. I keep everything in my safe."
A victim using the pseudonym Jane Doe testified at the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Jane was one of the first victims that Epstein and Maxwell had groomed. Jane suffered unimaginable physical and psychological trauma at the hands of her abusers. During the trial, she testified under oath about the time that Jeffrey Epstein took her to meet Donald Trump when she was 14 years old. Neither in court, or previously when she gave her sworn deposition, did the defense attorney or the prosecutor ask her what happened next. It seems like an obvious question when a witness testifies that when she was a 14-year-old sex slave, her 50-year-old handler took her to visit his 50-year-old friend. Why she wasn't asked will remain a mystery.
During one of my encounters with Jeffrey Epstein, he took me to Mar-a-Lago, where he introduced me to its owner, Donald Trump. I was 14 years old at the time. Jeffrey Epstein elbowed Mr. Trump playfully, asking him, referring to me, "This is a good one, right?" Mr. Trump smiled and nodded in agreement. They both chuckled, and I felt uncomfortable. I was too young at the time to understand why.
All right, now to stunning new developments in the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, a woman identified only by the pseudonym Jane. She says disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein took her to meet Donald Trump in the 1990s when she was just 14.
Jane testified that both Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein sexually abused her when at the age of 14. We're now on cross-examination, and there are a couple of headlines here. One, during cross-examination, the defense attorney asked her whether she said Jeffrey Epstein introduced her to Donald Trump. She said yes.
Virginia G. Euphray, formerly Roberts, is the most famous of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. Virginia was actually recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell from Mar-a-Lago, where Virginia, then in her teens, was working as a towel girl.
I was recruited at a very young age from Mar-a-Lago and entrapped in a world that I didn't understand, and I've been fighting that very world to this day, and I won't stop fighting. I will never be silenced until these people are brought to justice.
At the heart of all of this, of course, is Jeffrey Epstein, and I wonder how much you knew about Jeffrey Epstein and what he was up to and what he was forcing your daughter to do.
Yeah, I had no idea about that either. Like I say, when I worked for Trump, you know, and I got Virginia a job there in the spa at Mar-a-Lago, and then she was only there a couple weeks. It was very nice to have her there with me because we could have lunch together and, you know, talk, and it was great. It was a good time. And then when Miss Maxwell had recruited her to Jeffrey Epstein, you know, she was excited about it because they were going to teach her massage therapy.
The reason Virginia became famous is because in 2021 she filed a lawsuit against Prince Andrew under New York's Child Victims Act. Virginia alleged that she was forced to have several sexual encounters with Prince Andrew in the early 2000s at the age of 17. Prince Andrew settled out of court in 2022. Virginia's deposition was released to the public as part of the Epstein documents dump. In her sworn deposition, it was noted by defenders of Donald Trump that when asked whether she had ever seen Donald Trump at any Epstein properties participating in sex acts with minors, she stated the following.
I don't think Donald Trump participated in anything. That would have to be another assumption. I never saw or witnessed Donald Trump participate in those acts. But was he in the house of Jeffrey Epstein? I've heard he has been. But I haven't seen it myself, so I don't know.
When this statement went public, the Trump supporters went wild and posted throughout social media how President Trump had been exonerated. The truth was that Virginia was only one of what is estimated to be hundreds of victims. Her never seeing Donald Trump at an Epstein property doesn't really mean anything. However, the one short sentence that Trump defenders focus away from is what she said after she supposedly exonerated him.
I've heard he has been.
It's a pretty hard statement to miss.
I've heard he has been.
So, to summarize, Virginia never saw Donald Trump, but she swore under oath in a deposition that other victims had seen him. The last batch of the Epstein documents contained emails that were sent by victim Sarah Ransom to DailyMail.com columnist Maureen Callahan. Sarah was attempting to put an end to Epstein's sexual assaults by bringing his abuses to light. Sarah wrote that an unnamed friend, a fellow victim who she calls Jen, was one of the many girls who had sexual relations with Donald Trump, including at Epstein's New York townhouse.
The case number, if you want to put it in, it's 1:15-CV-07433-LAP. This appears to be, and we don't know, this could all be bullcrap. All of the case documents could be bullcrap, right? So let's be very clear about that. But what we do know is that this document is within the entire file set. You could go to page 316 if you do it in order. And it says here, this is all it starts with. Like, there's nothing before it. It just says Exhibit 6, and then it literally says this. Several girls at any one time. She confided in me about her casual friendship with Donald. Mr. Trump definitely seemed to have a thing for her, and she told me how he kept going on about how he liked her pert nipples. Donald Trump liked flicking and sucking her nipples until they were raw. One evening, when we were showering together, she showed me her nipples. They looked incredibly painful as they were red and swollen, and I remember wincing when I looked at them. I also knew she had sexual relations with Trump at Jeffrey's New York mansion on regular occasions, as I once met Jen for coffee.
Maria Farmer had a complicated relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Maria was originally hired to be a resident artist. Epstein had seen one of her paintings and loved her work. Epstein and Maxwell were introduced to Maria's younger sister Annie, who was 16 at the time. She caught their eye, and the grooming process began. Epstein and Maxwell promised to put Annie through school. But, as is always the case after weeks of filling her head with dreams and promises, the abuses with Annie began. Even though Maria was in her mid-20s, Epstein and Maxwell ultimately sexually assaulted her as well. Feeling sick and betrayed, Maria was the first person to file a complaint against Epstein to the FBI. Unfortunately, her words fell on deaf ears. She tried several times, reporting them to the authorities to no avail.
So, this FBI agent, who sounds like he just walked off a television series, Nesbitt, she said, we want to get to the bottom of this. Did she mean it? Did she succeed in that?
No. So all these years, she did mean it. She had little girls and she really wanted it to happen, and she cried to me, and she was not an actress. This woman had dedicated her life to this case. She couldn't believe what we'd been through. I need to tell you that while this was happening, Alan Dershowitz hired in the private sector the former FBI director of the United States to find dirt on us. They found one girl that had like weed in high school. You know, I mean, are you kidding? That's what the now that's the man, Louis Freeh is his name, Freeh. That man is the man that was head of the FBI when I made my very specific report outlining everyone I named in the beginning of the program. And I told them why I was naming them. And so for about 14 years now, Jim Hill of ABC News has been trying to get my FOIA request met. He was only able to get the second one, heavily redacted, but Nesbitt wanted to solve it. But this year, I saw where she signed off on the agreement. And now no one can find her. Like Brad Edwards, okay? He's a hero attorney. I'm not kidding you. He's the reason this whole thing happened. If it weren't for Brad Edwards and Virginia Roberts, David Boies and me, those people wouldn't have gone to jail.
As well as being a resident artist, Maria would also occasionally manage one of Epstein's properties. In this interview, Maria talks about managing a property one evening when Donald Trump walked in and mistook her for his date.
It was when I started working for Epstein, and it was 9 o'clock at night. And he's looking at me, and I'm like, oh, gross. You know, this guy's so gross. Anyway, he's just glaring at my legs. Like, yum. I told my sister, I felt like I was his dinner or his lunch, you know?
Yeah.
The way he was looking at me. So he assumed I was there for him. And this is how I know. Epstein walks up to him and he goes, no, she's not here for you. And they were smirking, and Epstein whispered something. He goes, go in there. And so Trump at 9 o'clock at night goes in the other room. If there's someone in there for him.
Right.
I don't know who. But Epstein said, no, she's not here for you.
Let's talk about Donald Trump and rape, because it's Monday and seems like a good topic. We've been telling you about the Jane Doe who filed 3 federal complaints about Donald Trump, against Donald Trump, for alleged child rape in connection with a party that she attended involving not only Donald Trump, but also Jeffrey Epstein. And this allegedly happened back in 1994. The alleged victim was 13 years old at the time. And we have not learned that much about the victim until now. We now know that the accuser is Katie Johnson. The most recent federal filing includes 3 affidavits, one from Katie Johnson herself, previously known to us as Jane Doe, plus 2 more, an eyewitness named Tiffany Doe and also a Joan Doe, a classmate of Johnson's back from 1994. Now, Johnson's story has been the same this entire time throughout all of these court proceedings. She recalled being approached by Tiffany, who allegedly worked for Jeffrey Epstein at the time. Tiffany invited Katie Johnson, who was then an aspiring model, to an event in Epstein's home to get to know people and maybe get a modeling job. And throughout the summer of 1994, the lawsuit alleges that Johnson endured, quote, savage sexual attacks by both Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein.
Katie Johnson is the only Epstein victim who officially filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump. She alleges that Donald Trump sexually assaulted her and raped her on 4 different occasions. These rapes occurred in 1994 when she was 13 years old. Katie's original lawsuit filed in California was thrown out by the judge. She had filed a civil rights suit but failed to actually state an applicable civil rights claim.
Katie filed a second lawsuit in New York with two highly credible lawyers guiding her, Thomas Mager and Lisa Bloom.
Katie withdrew her second claim after a hacker hacked into Lisa Bloom's server and Katie's personal details were found out. Up until that point, Katie was simply known as Jane Doe. After that, the death threats came pouring in, including a bomb threat. And the day that Katie was scheduled to live stream her press conference to the world, she panicked and walked away for good.
Jane Doe has received numerous threats today, as have all the Trump accusers that I have represented. She is living in fear. She has decided that she is too afraid to show her face. She's been here all day, ready to do it, but unfortunately, she's in terrible fear.
Katie gives a vivid and horrifying description in her sworn affidavit of the 4 encounters she had with Donald Trump. None of Katie's allegations have ever been debunked, nor has she ever retracted any of her statements. The only reason that she didn't follow through with her lawsuit was because of the barrage of death threats that she faced by Trump supporters. In 2016, Katie gave an interview to the British tabloid, the Daily Mail. She gave graphic details of her encounters that are all confirmed in her affidavit. The Daily Mail also confirmed her story with a witness to all the encounters, Tiffany Doe, an Epstein recruiter and coach who witnessed all of the encounters. We learned from Katie and Tiffany's testimony that Jeffrey Epstein provided coaches for his clients with girls like Katie who were virgins and didn't know how to pleasure a man. The coach would sit in on the session and guide the victim according to the client's instructions. For normal-minded people, it is impossible to process this kind of depravity. But both the victim and her witness have sworn in an affidavit to the validity of these encounters, under the threat of perjury for making a false statement.
During our first encounter, Mr. Trump didn't really talk to me at all. He spoke at me, but he was talking to Tiffany more, telling her what he wanted me to do. I thought he felt like he was too good to even speak to me. Tiffany told me what I needed to do. Anything he did say to me wasn't that great. Like, you need some work. I was 13. I didn't know what I was doing. Mr. Trump said very little to me during that first encounter other than I reminded him of his daughter. After I finished the sex act, he made a comment that I wasn't great, before putting on his pants. During our second encounter, I felt very intimidated. Mr. Trump made a comment that I wasn't doing it right, that I needed to take classes. He continued to let me do it. He didn't tell me to stop. He said something to Tiffany a couple of times, like tell her to go faster. For the third encounter, Mr. Trump had another girl and I dress as maids and pretend to clean the room. The other girl, Maria, was 12 years old. I felt she was going through the same thing as me, in that she was being forced to be there somehow. So we cleaned and then very clumsily kissed, and Mr. Trump caught us making out on the job as part of the role play. Mr. Trump then ordered us to carry out a string of sex acts on each other and on him. After he finished, he said we both could have done it better and then left. We never saw him again that night. Tiffany phoned me and told me my next encounter would be another role play. When I arrived, she told me what it was. I'm like freaking out. So you want to tie me to a bed and play out a rape scene with a man? She told me that's what Mr. Trump wanted. I made sure that Tiffany stayed in the room. Mr. Trump had agreed reluctantly to allow her. He was pretty rough with me. I was already tied to the bed. He pushed me around and tore off my clothes and then attempted to rape me. I started crying and I asked him to stop, and I asked Tiffany to come over, but he kept on going. Tiffany tried to intervene, but she was pushed away. Mr. Trump said, "What did you think this was gonna be?" He was very abrasive and I just started crying and I screamed and said, "Please don't." And he slapped me and told me to shut up, and then he ripped my panties off. After he finished, he got up and started putting on his clothes. He was disgusted by the fact I was crying. Mr. Trump didn't use a condom and I was worried about getting pregnant. He basically said that I should be proud that he would even allow me the opportunity, and if I got pregnant I could get an abortion. With that he threw $400 onto the floor. Tiffany made clear she wasn't happy with him. And then Jeffrey Epstein came in and he saw that there was money on the floor and got mad. He asked if I had asked for the money and said that he was going to be the one to pay me and said it wasn't mine to take.
Hideous death threats are a common weapon used by sexual predators. Some wonder if the threats do more damage than the abusive acts themselves. It was not uncommon for Jeffrey Epstein to issue threats to his sex slaves, not only threatening them if they were to ever talk, but also their families. The point being that Donald Trump's threats to Katie were not an anomaly, but the norm in that horrifying world.
Defendant Trump stated that I should never say anything if I didn't want to disappear like Maria, a 12-year-old girl who was forced to be involved in the third incident with Mr. Trump. Maria had not been seen since Mr. Trump said he was capable of having my whole family killed.
In her sworn affidavit, Tiffany Doe tells us how her life has been threatened by Jeffrey Epstein, especially now that she's speaking out.
After leaving the employment of Mr. Epstein in the year 2000, I was personally threatened by Mr. Epstein. He said that I would be killed and my family killed as well if I ever disclosed any of the physical and sexual abuse of minor females that I had personally witnessed by Mr. Epstein or any of his guests. I am coming forward to swear to the truthfulness of the physical and sexual abuse that I personally witnessed of minor females at the hands of Mr. Trump and Mr. Epstein, including the plaintiff, during the time of my employment from the years of 1990 to 2000 for Mr. Epstein. I swear to these facts under penalty of perjury, even though I fully understand that the life of myself and my family is now in grave danger. I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct.
A woman has filed a new lawsuit against Jeffrey Epstein's estate and the co-executors of that estate, claiming that Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell raped and sexually trafficked her and threatened to feed her to alligators if she ever told anyone. The lawsuit says in 2008, the then 26-year-old woman went to Jeffrey Epstein's Palm Beach mansion supposedly to cut his hair. Instead, she says she found a naked Epstein who proceeded with Maxwell's assistance to brutally rape plaintiff. The woman says she was going to call police, but two men showed up claiming they were police and threatened to arrest and deport her and take away her 8-year-old son. The lawsuit says Epstein and Maxwell forced her to drive to Naples along the way, picking up her son, and when she kept crying, stopped at a large body of water infested with alligators and threatened to throw her in to be devoured, as they said other women had been in the past.
And I went to the NYPD because the night I rolled into town in New York in my Ryder truck, I pulled up to my apartment, and Jeffrey Epstein had one of his butler's sons, Leslie's son, living in there. And so all my stuff was gone and he painted the whole place black. And so I walk into this black apartment and the phone's ringing and it was Ghislaine. And I was terrified. And she said, Maria, I'm going to burn your home, your life, your career's already burned, your family's going to burn, your friends are going to burn, and we're going to burn all of your art.
Jeffrey made it very clear that if I ever told anyone, went to the authorities, that he would kill me and my family. And my trauma was almost like a cancer inside my body. It just grew and grew and grew and grew.
It's crazy how people just walk by like it's any other building. No one notices. It's ironic that he had so many security cameras, as if he was going to be hurt or threatened by someone, when he was the monster. It was everyone else that needed to be protected.
President Trump, his family, and the Trump Organization is suing two of his longtime banks to prevent them from complying with demands from Congress for Trump records.
U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to sue top congressional Democrats Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff.
Former President Donald Trump is now countersuing writer E. Jean Carroll for defamation.
Former President Donald Trump has sent a formal notice to CNN threatening to sue the network for defamation if it doesn't abide by his requests.
Today, in conjunction with the America First Policy Institute, I'm filing as the lead class representative a major class action lawsuit against the big tech giants, including Facebook, Google, and Twitter.
This is amazing. Trump is threatening to sue Fox News for running a Lincoln Project ad.
Donald Trump is taking on George Stephanopoulos. The former president has filed a defamation lawsuit against the ABC host.
Former President Donald Trump filed a lawsuit this week against Hillary Clinton, the Democratic National Committee, and numerous top Democratic officials.
In a tweet posted Sunday afternoon, Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump said, quote, "Just to show you how unfair Republican primary politics can be, I won the state of Louisiana and get less delegates than Cruz. Lawsuit coming."
And breaking overnight, former President Trump has filed a $100 million lawsuit against his own niece and 3 New York Times reporters.
But the film includes some very controversial scenes, including one where Trump rapes his ex-wife Ivana. The Trump campaign is not at all happy about this. In fact, they said that they are planning on suing.
Donald Trump and his campaign are fighting mad about a Democratic PAC's use of Trump's own words to discourage Republicans from requesting mail-in ballots. And now Trump's campaign is threatening to sue.
We will be suing in Nevada, and that's already been taken care of. We'll probably file something tomorrow.
It's what he has called fake news. The president's campaign filed a libel lawsuit against the New York Times yesterday.
Donald Trump's lawyers have now threatened to sue ProPublica. They have sent a cease and desist letter saying, "How dare you make these accusations? If you don't get rid of it, we're going to sue you."
Donald Trump has asked a federal judge to temporarily stop the FBI from reviewing the material it seized from his home in Florida 2 weeks ago. In a lawsuit, the former U.S. president also asked the court to appoint what's called a special master.
Just in the last hour, Trump tweeting that he might sue Cruz over questions about his citizenship.
Yeah, so Gia, the Trump campaign is actually threatening a lawsuit after it received a bill from the Target Center for $530,000. Now, that would pay up front for security and other expenses during his rally tomorrow.
Attorneys for former President Donald Trump have filed a lawsuit against his former fixer, Michael Cohen, and they're asking for $500 million.
The former president has just filed a lawsuit against New York's Attorney General Letitia James, who's been investigating the former president and his company.
Every woman lied when they came forward to hurt my campaign. Total fabrication. The events never happened. Never. All of these liars will be sued after the election is over.
This is Donald Trump threatening to sue the women who are accusing him of sexual misconduct. Let's take a list here. You get 11 women. Look at this list. 11 women that have come forward since the tape of Trump making those lewd comments first surfaced. And these alleged assaults, some of them taking place more than 3 decades ago. The first one allegedly happening on a plane in 1980, and the last one we know of allegedly happening during a Miss Universe pageant in 2013. Most of the accusations are similar, groping, kissing, this kind of thing.
The lawsuit has been Donald Trump's favorite intimidation tool for decades. He uses it to hammer his enemies and opponents into submission. But for all the hundreds of lawsuits he's launched in his career, there are 2 very interesting omissions. This person.
During our first encounter, Mr. Trump didn't really talk to me at all. He spoke at me, but he was talking to Tiffany Moore, telling her what he wanted me to do. I thought he felt like he was too good to even speak to me. Tiffany told me what I needed to do. Anything he did say to me wasn't that great. Like, you need some work. I was 13. I didn't know what I was doing. Mr. Trump said very little to me during that first encounter other than I reminded him of his daughter. After I finished the sex act, he made a comment that I wasn't great, before putting on his pants.
And this person,
I personally witnessed the occasion where Mr. Trump forced 13-year-old Katie Johnson and a 12-year-old female named Maria to perform oral sex on him, and witnessed his physical abuse of both minors when they finished the act.
it is extremely puzzling why a man who uses lawsuits as a weapon to gain the advantage over all perceived enemies would allow two women to accuse him of the worst thing that a man could possibly be accused of: the rape of a child. The fact that Donald Trump never threatened to sue Katie Johnson or Tiffany Doe is highly suspicious. And there is something he did do that creates even more suspicion and leads one to believe that he knows that Katie's allegations are true.
You're about to hear from the reporter who obtained that secretly recorded audio.
And then there was Ronan Farrow.
Ronan was definitely underestimated by pretty much everybody, I believe.
A reporter and witness to a cultural shift that would define an era.
Thousands joining marches and rallies.
It was a movement that swept the country,
demonstrating against harassment of women, demanding equality and change.
from the nation's capital to the red carpets of Hollywood.
Why do you think you were able to get so many women to trust you?
I was fortunate to come at this story in a cultural moment where brave sources were starting to come forward and chip away at the dam, and where people were saying enough.
More than 80 women, according to the New York Times, coming forward publicly with accusations against arguably the most powerful man in Hollywood, Harvey Weinstein.
I thought he was a war hog from hell. I thought he was the single most ugly person I'd ever seen in my life.
I was able to tell this story because people were brave as hell, and they are still being brave as hell and refusing to shut up.
Ronan Farrow is a brilliant investigative journalist whose courage and superhuman persistence revealed to the world that Harvey Weinstein was a hideous monster. Because Weinstein was an incredibly powerful man, mainstream media attempted to crush Ronan's story. But he relented, and thanks to his fearlessness, millions of women found the courage to step forward and speak their voice, staying silent no longer. Ronan Farrow claims in his book Catch and Kill: Lies, Spies, and a Conspiracy to Protect Predators that AMI CEO David Pecker was in close contact with Donald Trump when the Katie Johnson rape allegations were made public in a 2016 lawsuit. National Enquirer editor Dylan Howard assured Trump's personal lawyer at the time, Michael Cohen, that they would track down the woman with the rape allegation and see what they could do about her. There was no opportunity to buy this story. David Pecker, a longtime friend of Trump's, only found out about the lawsuit after it was filed. Dylan Howard tried to use his influence to convince Katie's lawyer, Lisa Bloom, to drop her client. Lisa Bloom refused to consider any kind of payoff to buy her silence. Bloom told Newsweek magazine that she was representing Katie Johnson for free and strongly believed her allegations. So here's what we know. Donald Trump threatened to sue all of his accusers. He also talked directly about many of them, in most cases saying that he never even met them or that they were too ugly to sexually assault. But he never mentioned Katie Johnson. We also know that he never attempted to bury any of the 24 sexual assault allegations with the aid of his friend David Pecker at the National Enquirer. Jessica Leeds, Jill Harth, Karen Johnson, and Kristen Anderson all claimed in their allegations that Donald Trump attempted to fondle their genitals. Those are catastrophic revelations to come to light for a presidential candidate. E. Jean Carroll accused Donald Trump of rape, and his strategy was to publicly mock her. Donald Trump didn't feel compelled to have David Pecker bury any of these stories. There was only one allegation that he attempted to have buried, and that was Katie Johnson's. Since Donald Trump began his run in politics, his past with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell has always followed him. Trump's rabid followers will tell you that Trump and Epstein were never friends. They ran across each other at a few parties, and that was it. The more passionate ones believe that Trump was actually working undercover for the FBI in order to help take down Epstein. One thing that all of Trump's followers agree on is that victim Katie Johnson and her witness Tiffany Doe are lying. Here are some of the defenses that MAGA world has created for Donald Trump. 1. Many note that Katie Johnson's first lawsuit filed in California was thrown out on technical grounds. She had filed a civil rights suit, but failed to actually state an applicable civil rights claim. This is true, but Katie filed a second lawsuit in New York with 2 highly qualified lawyers guiding her. The case was never thrown out of court. Katie removed herself from the lawsuit because of the incredible number of death threats being issued to her by Trump's supporters. 2. Many of Trump defenders talk about Katie's relationship with a shady Jerry Springer producer named Norm Lubow. Lubow saw an opportunity to cash in on Katie's pain and made plans to move forward with a lawsuit of his own. A respected lawyer named Thomas Maher moved in and offered to represent Katie. He had read her account and believed her words. Maher made it clear that Katie's former association with Norm Lubow should not taint her allegations in any way. He firmly believed in her. Renowned lawyer Lisa Bloom also joined the team. Lisa was representing several other Epstein victims at the time. Some Trump supporters actually believe that Katie Johnson is a fictitious character created by Norm Lubow. 3. Victim's lawyer Brad Edwards exonerated Trump. In an interview during the Trump presidency, victim's lawyer Bradley Edwards was interviewed by a right-wing podcaster. The video of this interview went somewhat viral in MAGA world. Edwards recounted how Donald Trump was the only person to comply with a subpoena and was very helpful.
The only thing that I can say about President Trump is that he is the only person who, in 2009, when I served a lot of subpoenas on a lot of people, or at least gave notice to some pretty connected people that I wanted to talk to them, he is the only person who picked up the phone and said, "Let's just talk. I'll give you as much time as you want. I'll tell you what you need to know," and was very helpful in the information that he gave, and gave no indication whatsoever that he was involved in anything untoward whatsoever, but had good information that checked out and that helped us, and that we didn't have to take a deposition of him.
That was in 2009?
That was in 2009.
MAGA somehow translates this conversation into Trump being innocent of any abuses with Epstein's victims.
And gave no indication whatsoever that he was involved.
Think about that statement for a moment.
And gave no indication whatsoever that he was involved.
Mr. Trump gave no indication whatsoever that he was involved. So according to his supporters, Donald Trump is innocent because he didn't confess to Bradley Edwards during their phone call that he had sex with minors. 4. Trump defenders say that the statements by Katie Johnson have all been debunked. There is no truth to this. Katie's words were stated under oath and she has never retracted them. The only reason that Katie withdrew from her lawsuit was because of the barrage of death threats she was being subjected to. Just before her scheduled press conference, a hacker had hacked into Lisa Bloom's server and issued a warning that the press conference would not be taking place. Up until that point, there were a massive number of death threats and even a bomb threat. The hacker claimed to be the famous hacker Anonymous, but shortly after the real Anonymous posted from Twitter that it wasn't them. 5. Trump supporters will tell you that Katie Johnson admitted she was lying about being raped by Donald Trump. This belief comes from a headline posted by the British right-wing tabloid The Daily Mail. Exclusive. Troubled woman with a history of drug use who claims she was assaulted by Donald Trump at a Jeffrey Epstein sex party at age 13. Made it all up. There is a very interesting history behind this headline. Only 3 days earlier, Katie had given an interview with the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail is the most right-wing tabloid in the United Kingdom, and it's obvious from the headline that the intent of the article was to discredit Katie's allegations before the 2016 election. The problem was that the interview turned out to be a bombshell. Katie's graphic description of what Trump and Epstein did to her is sickening and heart-wrenching. The Daily Mail also interviewed Katie's witness, former Epstein recruiter Tiffany Doe. Tiffany confirmed to the Daily Mail that everything Katie stated in her interview was true. After the interview was posted, someone from Team Trump was clearly not pleased.
Only 3 days after Katie's bombshell interview was published, the Daily Mail posted their completely false headline.
If you read the article, you'll find out that Katie never retracts her statements. The Daily Mail knew that the headline itself would do enough damage and soften the impact of her previous interview. The actual content of the article was irrelevant. 6. Many Trump supporters say that the reason they know Trump never abused Katie is because as soon as he found out what Epstein was up to, he parted ways with him. This is a nonsensical defense with no basis in reality. It totally goes against Trump's own words about hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein for 15 years and that Jeff was a terrific guy that liked his women on the younger side. 7. Another popular defense of Donald Trump is that he banned Jeffrey Epstein from Mar-a-Lago when he found out that Epstein was hitting on a member's daughter.
Trump knows how to grab attention and other things, but now one best-selling crime writer is also turning heads with a new book that reveals the Mar-a-Lago owner actually kicked out South Florida financier Jeffrey Epstein. The incident allegedly took place at Mar-a-Lago back in 1999. One chapter in the book, Filthy Rich, details how Epstein was a regular at the club, but that all ended when a member's young daughter complained to her wealthy father. While relaxing at Mar-a-Lago, she had been approached and invited out to Epstein's house. The girl said that she had gone and that Epstein had tried to get her to undress. The girl's father had gone directly to Trump, who, in no uncertain terms, told Epstein that he was barred from Mar-a-Lago.
There are several variations to this story. There is evidence that Trump did kick Epstein out. It has been more widely reported that their split was over a dispute with a Florida real estate deal. Both Epstein and Trump were bidding on a mansion, and it became very ugly.
Apparently they had a falling out over a mansion. I was reading a story about it.
Like when he sold him? Or
no, they were both trying to buy some super exclusive property that was like the crown jewel of Palm Beach. It was this 6-acre mansion that overlooks the ocean. It's on the beach. It's beautiful.
That's
and it's
a hell of a plantation for girls.
Well, Well, it's also one of those things where, like, if you're a part of these communities, there's certain properties that are iconic, and to own them, it would elevate your social status. Like, did you hear Trump bought the mansion de Chaumobo? So, like, it had like
some elite shit.
It had like a name to it. The place is off the charts. If you see it on TV, like, you get a sense.
That's not it.
What is this?
I thought that was
it's a cane. Apparently, he's known to having a famous walking stick.
I thought you were showing Epstein and Trump.
He did have the cane. What was the house?
Yeah,
Google the house that they competed about. Trump and him competed over a house. Like,
it's got many waterfalls.
Well, it's really old, I think.
14-year-olds in every room.
It's like if someone was like a super billionaire character and I don't know, name some famous man, like the Hearst Castle. Okay. The Hearst Castle for sale. They'd all be trying to get it. Trump and Epstein's friendship reportedly soured after they fought over a $41 million Palm Beach mansion. 2 weeks after the home's auction, cops received a tip about underage women at Epstein's house. Oh, shit.
Man. That was Candyland. Yeah.
Let's see if they have pictures of the place.
That's like a Taj Mahal. Look at that thing.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
That thing's gorgeous.
Dude, it's dope as fuck. The images are insane. That's it right there. Click on that. Look at that place. So you get it. They're fighting over who's got the biggest dick on Palm Beach. If you own that motherfucker, you bought that place, like, you're king baller. Everybody wants to have the party at your house.
Whether you believe the split was due to Epstein hitting on a girl or it happened because of a real estate deal gone bad, one thing that is known is that the split between the two happened in 2007. They had been friends since 1987, so the split happened 20 years into their relationship. So this talking point of Trump kicking Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago is not really evidence of anything. No one really cares why the two pedophiles stopped becoming friends. What people do want to know is what happened during those 20 years when they hung out together. 8. Katie Johnson and Tiffany Doe are lying on their sworn affidavit. Many of his supporters defend Donald Trump by saying that Katie Johnson was lying on her sworn affidavit. There's no evidence to prove this, of course. They just blindly state it and move on. There are two facts to consider about this baseless claim. One, if either of her lawyers suspect that Katie is lying, they have a legal obligation to withdraw.
If during the course of your pretrial testimony in your lawyer's office, your lawyer believes and recognizes that what you are saying is in fact a lie, no matter how small it is, no matter how big it is, in all likelihood, the attorney is going to withdraw as your attorney. Now, why would he do that? It's because your lawyer has an ethical obligation not to put on proof, not to put on testimony that he knows to be a lie, that he knows to be inaccurate. That is suborning perjury, where now you know that a witness has testified falsely. You can't put that witness up at trial. You cannot have that witness testify, because if you do, now you are going ahead and knowingly putting a witness on the stand who's going to be testifying about something that is false and inaccurate. And doing that, the attorney can get in a lot of trouble. The attorney can be sanctioned. The attorney can be fined. There's a possibility the attorney could lose his license to practice law.
2. If any of her statements are found to be false, she could face jail time.
So what's the real repercussion here? The real repercussion for lying is that you could have thrown your entire case out the window because the jury no longer believes you. That's the first repercussion. What's the second? Let's say you lied about your income and you lied about your tax returns. Now you raise the possibility, I say possibility, that the judge is going to refer your matter and your lying to the district attorney in the county in which your case is pending. In that instance, now you run the risk of being investigated and prosecuted for lying under oath during the course of your trial. And that could have separate repercussions, because now you have converted what would be a civil litigation case, a civil case trying to obtain money as a form of compensation. Now you have to deal with a criminal case where the prosecutor from the state of New York is now potentially bringing charges against you for lying under oath in your civil lawsuit.
Neither Katie or Tiffany have any incentive to lie and risk going to jail. The only people who lie under oath are usually those who face a greater risk by telling the truth. 9. Donald Trump would never rape a child. He's leading the fight against child sex trafficking. Donald Trump is the new Moses. In 2023, the movie Sound of Freedom was released. It dove deep into the horrifying world of child sex trafficking and brought it into the spotlight. The star of the movie was actor Jim Caviezel, who had played Jesus in Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ. Right-wing influencers pushed the movie with tremendous force. It was declared that anyone who didn't go see the movie must be a pedophile. Something that organically took place during the frenzy of this movie's release was the crowning of a new champion to end child sex trafficking. This new Moses was none other than Donald Trump.
We have to do a lot more, and we got to start with Donald Trump.
What do you mean?
Well, he's got to be in there because he's going to go after the traffickers.
Do you think he understands that?
We were with him last night.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, so he's going to be moved to do something. I didn't know that.
Oh,
he wasn't here last night.
This is the new Moses. I mean, I'm still Jesus, but he's the new Moses. Pharaoh, let my children go free.
All right.
Our country will not rest until we have put these vile organizations out of business and rescued every last victim. And we will not stop until we have stamped out the menace of human trafficking once and for all.
Crowning Donald Trump as the new champion to end child sex trafficking is like crowning Hannibal Lecter as the new champion to end cannibalism.
To understand the profound hypocrisy of this disturbing alliance, we'll take a short visit into Trump's past,
beyond his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Before the turn of the century, having sex with minors was just kind of a thing that rich and powerful men did. In the music world, it was just assumed at some point that your favorite rock star had sex with a minor. It just wasn't shunned upon like it is now. Artists like the Rolling Stones and Ted Nugent wrote songs about having sex with underage girls and no one batted an eye. And when it came to rock stars raping minors, there were none more famous than Elvis Presley.
When Elvis Presley first took to the stage in the mid-1950s, conservative America had a heart attack. But his young fans, particularly his young female fans, couldn't get enough of the soon-to-be king of rock and roll. Many of those admirers are now distinguished elders, and while they continue to adore Elvis, they're also revealing some long-held secrets. It seems the king actually dated quite a few of them when they were young teenagers. While we've always known that Elvis fell in love with 14-year-old Priscilla Bayou, what has been hidden until now was his infatuation with young girls.
It was well known in the 80s and 90s that Donald Trump hosted parties featuring underage girls looking to hook up with powerful men. It wasn't really a big deal back then. It's just kind of what he did. Trump hosted several parties with his pedophile friend John Casablancas. Casablancas was a fashion icon who ran the elite model agency. Several women accused Casablancas of abusing them when they were minors. He famously groomed his third wife, Aline Wermelinger, from the age of 15 and married her when she turned 17. He and Donald Trump would occasionally co-host parties with young girls. Some of the attendees have talked about their experience.
I remember this Italian girl, extremely naive, who couldn't speak any English. She was easy prey. They were all around her. We were a bunch of kids, just put there with all these older men.
And then down this large staircase, in front of all of us, there was Donald Trump, and behind him there were 3 actors. I don't want to name them because they're all still around. They came down the stairs and spread out like sharks among the girls, who had broken up into little clusters throughout the room. During the 5-day competition, it was very clear that there were opportunities to go out and party with Donald. The contestants were led to believe that if you were nice to certain people, good things will happen to you, and I think that's why girls were going out.
I remember attending a dinner with John Casablancas and Donald Trump. This time it was a private area, a big table and lots of girls. I'd say around 10 to 15 of us, all between the ages of 14 and 18. It was just us models, Trump and John. We were all underage, but we were offered drinks. I went home early, but other children stayed.
Donald Trump also hosted legendary parties at the Plaza Hotel in the 80s and 90s in New York City. These parties were full of young models looking to connect with older, powerful men. Andy Lucchese was a friend of Trump's who was a male model and would recruit young girls for the Plaza Hotel parties. Lucchese told the Daily Beast,
"It's fair to say that I was a recruiter for the parties. As for the parties themselves, there was cocaine around. Donald Trump did not do cocaine. He was in control of himself. Girls? Well, of course. But did he have sex with his female party guests? So, he's a man with a woman. How old were they? A lot of girls, 14, look 24. That's as juicy as I can get. I never asked how old they were. I just partook. I did partake in activities that would be considered controversial today."
When Donald Trump owned several beauty pageants, one of the perks was being able to walk into the dressing room of the contestants and see half-dressed or naked teens. He bragged about doing this to Howard Stern.
I mean, some of these foreign girls, Mr. Trump, in my country, we say hello with vagina. And
well, you could also say, as the owner of the pageant, it's your obligation to do that.
So you have done that. Now,
I'll tell you the funniest is that I'll go backstage before a show.
Yes.
And everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else. And, no men are anywhere. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant, and therefore I'm inspecting it. I'm inspecting. I want to make sure that
like
everything is good.
You're there.
Yeah, the dress. Is everyone okay? They're standing there with no clothes. Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible-looking women. And so I sort of get away with things like that.
He just came strolling right in. There was no time to put on a robe. Some girls were topless. Other girls were naked.
The time that he walked through the dressing rooms was really shocking. We were all naked.
He came backstage and was looking me over like I was just a piece of meat. No one dreams of being ogled when you're a little girl wanting to wear a crown. It was certainly the most inappropriate time to meet us all for the first time. The youngest girl was 15, and I was the eldest at 19.
Donald Trump also had this now famous exchange with a preteen girl in a shopping mall.
In the wake of questions and allegations about Donald Trump's behavior towards women, ET discovered this footage in our archive, which we provided to CBS News.
Soon. Thursday night. You're going up the escalator? I'm going to be dating her in 10 years. Can you believe it? Okay.
Before we end this segment, let's check in on the new Moses to see what he's up to.
What's up, guys? It's your boy, Benny. So people are losing their minds because the man who shut down human sex trafficking across our southern border is now screening a movie, the #1 movie in the world, Sound of Freedom, at his private club. That man's name is Donald Trump, and the people who made that movie, Jim Caviezel, Tim Ballard, and Angel Studios, held a private screening at Donald Trump's Bedminster Club last night. Bedminster in New Jersey. The screening was really, really a beautiful sight to behold. I was watching along with many on social media. Jack Posobiec tweeting this image of Donald Trump. You can see right there, classic hair, next to Jim Caviezel, saying President Trump sits in the front row with Jim Caviezel on one side, Tim Ballard, the man that the movie is based on the other side. He hasn't moved an inch since the film began. This tweet doing numbers, 10,000 retweets. So this is what it looked like. They screened it outside. Very cool showing here. Donald Trump said, "You made this the hottest movie in the world. It's made $100 million. They are on a run today." But people are saying, of course, the liberal media tried to trash it as an anti-human trafficking film, QAnon influenced. Interesting how they actually trotted out predator protectors at Bloomberg and at The Guardian, people who have openly advocated for reducing crimes for people who commit sex crimes and commit horrible acts against children, to bash this movie. Well, seems like you should maybe have a little star by your name saying this person is a predator.
I told Tiffany that I could get pregnant because Mr. Trump didn't use a condom. Mr. Trump said that I should be proud that he would even allow me the opportunity, and if I got pregnant, I could get an abortion. Then he threw $400 onto the floor in my direction.
10. Donald Trump never went to Epstein's island. There is a popular belief that most, if not all, of Epstein's abuses occurred on his island. The truth is that Jeffrey Epstein had properties all over the world, and only a small fraction of the abuses took place on his island. All the references we have to Trump's abuses through Maria Farmer, Jane Doe, Virginia G. Frey, Sarah Ransom, Katie Johnson, and Tiffany Doe all took place on Epstein estates in Florida and New York. 11. If Donald Trump was guilty of having sex with minors, he would be in prison. There are no Epstein clients who have ever even been charged with a crime. There have been 3 civil cases against clients, and that's it. Virginia G. Frey sued Prince Andrew and settled out of court. She also sued Alan Dershowitz after giving vivid descriptions of their sessions in her deposition. After Alan Dershowitz countersued her, Virginia withdrew her lawsuit, stating that she may have made a mistake of who the man was she had sex with 6 times. An Epstein victim whose name is being withheld is currently suing multi-billionaire Leon Black. Her description of his abuse, as well as the abuses of Epstein and Maxwell, is horrifying. 12. Donald Trump didn't rape any girls. He was the one who helped the FBI take down Epstein. This is another nonsensical defense that is based on zero evidence. Most Trump supporters who actually believe this are probably referring to the subpoena Trump was issued by victim's lawyer Brad Edwards. As we covered earlier, Trump phoned Edwards to comply with the subpoena and managed not to implicate himself. That's all he did. The person who took down Jeffrey Epstein was Miami Herald reporter Julie K. Brown. Julie was appalled when she read about the sweetheart deal Epstein had received in Florida. She channeled her outrage and wrote an investigative series on Epstein that won her a Pulitzer Prize. It also led to the resignation of Alex Acosta, the Trump administration's Secretary of Labor, who had overseen Epstein's sweetheart deal that even allowed him to work from home. Before Julie's reporting, no one had ever heard of Jeffrey Epstein except his victims and his clients. 13. Katie Johnson doesn't exist. The most outrageous defense of Donald Trump is that Katie Johnson never existed. The fact that Katie Johnson filed a sworn affidavit is seen in photos with her lawyer Lisa Bloom, had a lengthy interview with the Daily Mail, has a witness who swore under oath to the abuses Katie has described, and even made her own YouTube video talking about her abuses, is irrelevant to these people. And finally, 14. Donald Trump is a white hat operative who helped to take down Jeffrey Epstein.
Now we are calling for a great reawakening of nations. I intend to address some of the very serious threats before us today, but also the enormous potential waiting to be unleashed. We live in a time of extraordinary opportunity.
A white hat hacker, also known as an ethical hacker, is a cybersecurity professional who uses their skills to identify vulnerabilities in networks. There is a group of people who I'll call QAnon-leaning that believe Donald Trump was a white hat operative who pretended to be a pedophile in order to hack into Jeffrey Epstein's inner circle to help take him down. I wish I was kidding. You can see some of the many tweets referring to this undercover operation. Donald Trump will occasionally wear a white MAGA hat at his rallies. He knows that wearing the white hat will send many of his followers into a tiz. Whenever Trump wears a white MAGA hat, deeply disturbed people post about how he's sending them a secret message. Meanwhile, Trump, always recognizing the potential of a good grift, is now selling white MAGA hats from his online store.
Tell number 5. The first thing you should look at when the flop comes out is your opponent's eyes. If their eyes quickly glance at their chips, that means they like what they see. Number 4 tell you should look at. When you're playing in a poker game and you're going to get ready to bet, if you notice out of the corner of your eye that your opponent is reaching for chips early, that should tell you something. He's either going to raise you or call you. Tell number 3. When a guy splashes his chips really aggressively and puts his whole arm out like that, that's a sign that he's trying to scare you. What does that mean? He doesn't have a really good hand. He's probably bluffing. The number 2 tell is watching for guys that speak gibberish. I talk a lot at the table. One of the reasons for that is I get a read off my opponent. If you ask a person a question like, what's the weather like? And they give you an answer that makes absolutely no sense, it's probably because they're nervous, because they're bluffing. And the number 1 secret tell that you're going to get right here and now is, oh, never mind. What am I, crazy? I'm not giving you that one. You'll have to learn it on your own.
Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah. I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. But I think I would.
Do you think that would restore trust? Help restore trust?
Yeah, I don't know about Epstein so much as I do the others. Certainly about the way he died. It'd be interesting to find out what happened there because that was a weird situation and the cameras didn't happen to be working, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I'd go a long way toward that one. The other stuff I would definitely do the January 6th.
Okay, that was hilarious. And 9/11, yeah, absolutely. Kennedy, sure. Epstein, I guess so. I mean, less so. Not Epstein, less so. Why don't you just give it away? He's in the file.
He said he might declassify some very interesting documents. Let's listen to this.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
Guy, declassify Jeffrey Epstein files? What do you think? And the rest of that list.
That last one is extra interesting.
Yeah, it is extra interesting,
I would like to see that. I think a lot of Americans would like to see that.
That originally aired on Fox and Friends, but was cut off right when Donald Trump said, yeah, I would. And then everything else he said was a major backtrack. By the way, it's incredibly significant news anytime Donald Trump talks about Jeffrey Epstein, anytime anyone in a position of power talks about Jeffrey Epstein, for what it's worth, for a news outlet, I think actually to get Donald Trump talking like that about Jeffrey Epstein is a pretty big story.
So how do you end a documentary that did a deep dive into the friendship between the world's 2 most famous pedophiles? You can't really. There is no way to just wrap it up. We have just completed a 90-minute journey that gave witness to a grotesque sublevel of the human experience that we're just not equipped to process. So we'll end this journey with a simple comparison. We'll compare the sworn statements of 2 extraordinary women made under oath under the threat of perjury and physical harm with the provably false statements of a known pathological liar.
Mr. President, Ghislaine Maxwell has been arrested on allegations of child sex trafficking. Why would you wish such a person well?
First of all, I don't know that, but I do know that...
She has. She's been arrested for that.
First of all, he's trying to play this part like he doesn't really know what the allegations are. How can you not know? Everybody in the country knows what the allegations are.
Donald Trump was asked about the prince.
I don't know Prince Andrew. 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 But it's a tough story. It's a very tough story. I don't know him. No.
But after those comments, photos of Trump were being circulated online, including some showing Trump and his then-girlfriend Melania with the prince and Epstein at the same Mar-a-Lago event almost 20 years ago. And these photos from the Duke of York's Twitter page show Trump and the prince together in June of this year.
You had an extraordinary dinner, I think, in London, didn't you, where Donald Trump was there and Epstein and Prince Andrew. And Bill Clinton.
I mean, as well.
So the small dinner party, and you're sitting there with all these extraordinary people.
I was never on Epstein's plane or at his stupid island. There is plenty of hard evidence that he rode on Epstein's plane, and not just one time, 7 times, at least 7 times.
I was not a fan of Jeffrey Epstein, and you watched people yesterday saying that I threw him out of a club. I didn't want anything to do with him. That was many, many years ago. It shows you one thing, that I have good taste, okay? Now, other people, they went all over with him. They went to his island. They went all over the place. He was very well known in Palm Beach. His island, whatever his island was, wherever it is, I was never there. Find out the people that went to the island. But Jeffrey Epstein was not somebody that I respected. I threw him out. In fact, I think the great James Patterson, who's a member of Mar-a-Lago, made a statement yesterday that many years ago I threw him out. I'm not a fan of Jeffrey Epstein.
I personally witnessed Mr. Trump physically threaten the life of the plaintiff. If she ever revealed any details of the physical and sexual abuse suffered by her at the hands of Mr. Trump, I swear to these facts under penalty of perjury, even though I fully understand that the life of myself and my family is now in grave danger. I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct.
Immediately following this rape, Defendant Trump threatened me that, were I ever to reveal any of the details of Defendant Trump's sexual and physical abuse of me, my family and I would be physically harmed if not killed. I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct.